going on.
Yeah.
And these people that say he's canceled.
You suspect too, but I ain't gonna speak.
I ain't never suspect.
You suspect like
Suspect of what?
Right? As a representation of my culture where I come from. All of us.
Wack 100 was once seen as a behind-the-scenes kingpin of American hip-hop, a figure capable of controlling every move and decision of the game, a name powerful enough to make the entire industry roll out the red carpet and hunt him like a prized asset. But what the public saw was only a harmless outer shell. What Wack 100 truly held in his hands was far more terrifying. One phone call was enough to get a lead singer replaced. One sentence forced 50 Cent to step forward and explain himself. And one man who made everyone from local police to the FBI watch their steps carefully. Why does a studio boss wield that kind of power? Who is the name standing behind him, backing him up? What kind of rules is Hollywood really operating under, lifting the strong to the top and quietly crushing the weak? Do not look away. The truths that follow are shocks not everyone can handle. This will be the day you realize Wack 100 is more dangerous than any villain you have ever seen on screen. On Pacoima, a poor childhood joining a notorious gang. Cash McElroy Jones, widely known by his professional name. Wack 100 is one of the most controversial yet deeply influential figures in the modern hip-hop music industry. Born on April 7, 1977 in Pacoima, an area located in the San Fernando Valley of Los Angeles. Wack 100 built a formidable career from the ashes of a life filled with violence, criminal activity, and incarceration. Wack 100's childhood was shaped by extremity and desperation. He grew up watching his father slide into addiction starting when he was just 5 years old, while his mother was the only one holding the family together. His father was not merely a drug addict, but the go-to guy in the neighborhood to get product, a position that carried both power and constant danger. That reality exposed Wack to drug culture, not through warnings, but through daily life itself. People coming in and out of the house, whispered conversations, rules that were never written down, but everyone understood. Wack 100's childhood was a constant conflict between exceptional intellectual ability and the economic survival demands of his family. Wack was an extremely intelligent student, always earning A grades, skipping grades, showing real ability. Counselors once predicted he would continue on a long academic path. But at that time, education was not the priority. His father collapsed under the consequences of excessive drug use. The family did not have enough money to pay for electricity, water, or even food. He needed to help his mother keep the lights on to earn money to cover the most basic living expenses. And so, at 12 years old, Wack joined the Valley Power R Gang, a distinctly local branch of the Bloods. His older brothers were already in the gang and had criminal records. Joining was not some major initiation ritual. It felt like the next predetermined step. Around the same age, Wack began selling candy at school. He described the act as mimicking what I saw my father doing, except with candy instead of drugs. His mother warned him to stop. But when there is no money, advice becomes fragile. The selling brought him about $50 to $60 a week in profit. He would fold the cash neatly and place it into his mother's bag so she could get by. His mother was deeply religious and believed that Jesus was blessing them, unaware that the electricity and water bills were being paid with her son's candy money. And of course, the first arrests came very early. Wack became involved in an assault with a dangerous weapon involving a BB gun. After that came increasingly serious charges from attempted murder and shootings to weapons possession spanning from the juvenile system into the adult system. At 16, Wack 100 was transferred directly from a juvenile justice center to Delano State Penitentiary, one of the harshest prisons in California. He signed a waiver of rights agreeing to be moved immediately into the adult prison system in exchange for a sentence reduction from 17 years down to 7 years. During his time in prison, he blamed himself every single day. "You're an idiot." He had blamed his father for not being there for crack cocaine taking his father away. But he later reflected that he himself had become the father absent, in the same way through gang culture, street life, and imprisonment. And from inside prison, he warned himself that he would not repeat the cycle. The journey to building the Cash Money West power empire. 19 years old, just released from prison, no high school diploma, only a GED certificate to prove he had finished school. but not enough to open any respectable doors. With a felony on his record, finding a job or renting a place became a nearly unsolvable problem. But he had planned ahead. He studied the DMV truck driving manual from beginning to end. He memorized everything needed to become a licensed commercial truck driver, and thanks to that knowledge, he was hired as a truck driver. Around the year 2000, while he was still driving trucks, he began making contact with Death Row Records through a childhood friend known as Pooh. Pooh brought him to Death Row Records to meet people. He started observing how Death Row operated. He was not an artist. He did not begin working as security or muscle for Suge Knight. Instead, he asked business questions. He asked about publishing masters' royalties. Gradually, Wack developed business instincts within the industry. Violence and fear could only take you so far. To build a lasting empire, he needed to understand business law and public relations. The turning point came when Ray J released Sexy Can I. Wack 100 became involved in pushing the song. He used his relationships, especially DJ K Slay, to dominate the New York market through mixtapes. The song began gaining traction on the East Coast, then spread back to the West Coast. Sexy Can I eventually became a national hit, climbing deep into the Billboard Hot 100 and becoming the most catchy song of Ray J's career at that time. That success completely changed Wack 100's position. At that point, Wack realized that the music and entertainment industry could generate profits far beyond logistics. The combination of business initiative, networking ability, and profit awareness was the key. Things escalated further when Wack 100 met the game, a major rapper widely known through 50 Cent's G-Unit Records. After removing his former manager Jimmy Henchman, a murderer, Wack took full control of the game's management. He signed independent distribution deals, negotiated contracts directly, and focused on building the game as an independent hip-hop icon no longer tied to G-Unit or any other label. After that, Wack continued managing viral rappers of that era, such as Blueface. By 2018, Wack 100 partnered with Birdman to establish a new division called Cash Money West. This deal elevated Wack from an independent manager to the level of a major label force. And from that moment on, he was no longer just someone behind artists. He became a power in the game. However, with success, he began to see himself as special and untouchable, ready to judge others without restraint. He did not hesitate to publicly criticize legends such as Tupac, E40, or YG. The nightmare began when he touched the name Nipsey Hussle, an endless chain of scandals. 9 months after Nipsey Hussle was murdered in March 2019, Wack 100 appeared at the game's 40th birthday party. There he was stopped by a TMZ reporter and asked what seemed like a simple question. "Do you think Nipsey Hussle died a legend?" Wack's answer dropped into the air like a heavy object. He said Nipsey was not a legend. He demanded a redefinition of the word legend. He listed numbers one by one. 1 studio album, no radio hits, no global tour, fewer than 1 million followers while alive. Then he concluded that only after death did Nipsey receive platinum certification, sell more records, and gain another 9 or 10 million followers. In that framing, the spotlight was not on the career, but on the death. What outraged the community was not only the content, it was the timing and the context. A man who had been dead for less than a year, unable to respond, unable to defend himself, and dissected using cold numbers like a business report. For many, that was the moment they felt this was no longer a music debate, but a display of public lack of empathy, even inhumanity. Even the game, who was both Wack's friend and Nipsey's close friend, had to speak out and express his disagreement. Before the situation could cool down a few weeks later, it escalated into real-world violence. Wack 100 was punched in the face multiple times by one of Nipsey's close friends, who then ran off. Regardless of the specific motive, the image spread instantly. Words had left the screen and collided directly with the man who spoke them. On social media, Wack responded by challenging back, saying that beating him required more than words, and that next time, if someone was sent, do not send someone who knows how to run. That reaction only intensified the backlash. Many thought that would be the lesson, but time showed that Wack did not stop. The peak came in May 2025, as Sean Combs faced federal charges and social media was in full frenzy mode. Wack 100 publicly claimed that Nipsey had attended the rumored freak-off parties associated with Diddy. He went further, stating that Lauren London was the one who introduced Nipsey to Diddy. No evidence, no independent confirmation. Just words released at a moment when public tension was stretched tight. From that point, the question was no longer whether the accusation was true or false, but about motive. Why is Wack 100 so obsessed with Nipsey Hussle? One perspective raised by many is jealousy. While alive, Nipsey was often labeled a local rapper who did not chase radio hits. But after his death, he received something many never achieved: near absolute respect from the community. Not because of numbers, but because of how he lived and how he is remembered. Meanwhile, Wack is someone who measures value through metrics: albums, streams, charts. 5 months earlier, Wack said Nipsey was not a legend because he only had one album. Now with that same album, Wack says Nipsey is a legend. Wack completely changed the criteria based solely on streaming numbers, not on any reflection about Nipsey's legacy. That sparked a battle across social media flooded with criticism, with one commenter saying, "Last year you said he wasn't a legend. Now you say he is. You're only saying that for views. You're lying to stay relevant." And the question that remains unanswered after all of this still hangs in the air. When an icon is no longer alive to defend himself, who truly has the right to define the value of his life? The biggest gang case in hip-hop history, Big U RICO. In March 2025, the South Los Angeles hip-hop community was shaken when Big U, real name Eugene Henley Jr., an OG of the Rollin 60s Crips, who also presented himself as an anti-violence activist, was arrested along with 18 other members in a federal RICO case. This was not an ordinary arrest. This was the kind of file authorities only open when they believe an entire structure has operated like a criminal enterprise for years. The federal indictment described a complex network. The allegations included targeted assaults, extortion of high-profile figures, fraud through the nonprofit organization, developing options drug, and weapons trafficking, and even the misuse of funds from COVID relief programs. What stunned the public was not only the severity of the charges, but the dual image of Big U. On one side, a street OG. On the other, a familiar face in anti-gang campaigns appearing in the media as a community peacemaker. And within that entire indictment, one detail forced many to read twice. The name Wack 100 appeared 6 times, not charged, not arrested, but referenced repeatedly in one of the most serious legal documents in modern hip-hop history. For someone known only as an artist manager, this was unprecedented. The court did not declare Wack 100 guilty of any crime, but it raised a series of questions. How does someone outside the gang structure know internal details about Rollin 60's operations? Why did Wack repeatedly discuss gang business publicly on podcasts and Clubhouse, when those worlds traditionally survive on silence? And most importantly, does Wack hold some form of informational leverage powerful enough to be converted into money or control over rappers tied to South LA? Immediately after the information leaked, Big U reacted aggressively. He publicly stated that anyone talking gang business on podcasts was a snitch. The accusation did not name anyone directly, but public suspicion immediately pointed toward Wack 100. In the world of street politics, being placed in a zone of doubt is enough for reputations to begin cracking. Critics began reassembling the puzzle pieces. They pointed to Wack's past discussions of sensitive operations. They noted how information thought to be sealed had appeared on public platforms. They raised the theory that talking too much may have contributed to exposing the structure, creating conditions for a RICO case to be completed. No one presented direct evidence. But in this world, sometimes the question itself is dangerous enough. Wack 100 pushed back bluntly. He said he only referenced information that was already public. He denied any connection to law enforcement. If there were discussions involving documents, they went through attorneys, and that was business, not extortion. According to Wack's logic, speaking on what everyone already knows cannot be considered snitching. But the court raised another more difficult question: profitability. Wack's behavioral pattern was examined alongside what Big U was accused of. The leaked jail calls involving Young Thug, sensitive statements tied to Nipsey Hussle, accusations released publicly to generate pressure. All of it was placed side by side not to convict, but to ask if someone consistently accesses sensitive information who benefits when that information is released or withdrawn. The money question became central. Where does Wack make money when sensitive information comes to light? Is there or is there not a practice of celebrities paying to have content taken down or never mentioned again? And with artists like Blueface or The Game, both rooted in South LA, are they being pulled into the influence zone of structures, once controlled by Big U? Some defended Wack. Adam22 once said that Wack operates through attorneys, and that taking content down does not equal extortion, but is part of modern media business. On paper, the argument sounds reasonable, but placed within the context of a historic RICO case, it is not enough to erase the unease. Observers began drawing comparisons. The Big U RICO case was placed alongside the collapse of Suge Knight in the 1990s, alongside the life sentence of Jimmy Henchman in the early 2010s, precisely when Wack emerged as the replacement figure managing the game. Within that chain of comparisons, Wack 100 emerged as a new archetype, not a gang boss, not an artist, but an operator of the gray zone standing between street codes and legitimate business. The outcome of the Big U RICO case is still unfolding, but one thing has already happened. For the first time in hip-hop history, a person not charged with a crime has been placed at the center of suspicion over informational power. What is the motive? Who pays? Who benefits? And if Wack 100 is not cooperating with authorities, then what form of power allows him to stand so close to dangerous secrets? The final question still hangs. In an era where information can destroy both gangs and careers, is Wack 100 a harmless storyteller, or the most critical link in a new model hip-hop has never faced before? Dangerous relationships and how Wack 100 walks the lines. If you look back at Wack 100's entire journey, one thing cannot be denied. He did not build his position by standing firmly on one side. He exists by moving through factions, speaking with people. Most of the industry only dares to mention in whispers. And that is exactly what created a network that is both an asset and a constant source of conflict. With Suge Knight, the relationship smelled like gunpowder from the beginning. Wack did not appear merely as a casual acquaintance. He became involved in managing business dealings, handling sensitive expenses, and even covering funeral costs for Suge's mother. More importantly, Wack was drawn into complex agreements surrounding rights publishing and even film projects based on Suge Knight's life story. But Suge is the kind of figure who never stays still. Erratic behavior prolonged legal issues, and unpredictable decision-making kept the relationship permanently stretched to its limit, not because of a lack of money, but because of a lack of stability. And in an industry built entirely on trust, that is the most dangerous thing of all. With The Game and 50 Cent, the story took on a different tone. This was not just a management or business partnership. It was a problem of ego-historical conflict and fractures that never truly healed. Wack has spoken about standing between tensions, protecting the artist's interests, while attempting to cool disputes that seemed impossible to resolve. Sometimes it was peace negotiations, sometimes efforts to reunite factions like G-Unit in a context where everyone carried history and suspicion. What stood out was that Wack did not choose to pour fuel on the fire. He handled these clashes like a negotiator, not an instigator. At least that is how he described his role. Even with media conflict was not an exception. The relationship between Wack 100 and Vlad TV began with hostility. A controversial photo shoot involving a Kim Kardashian lookalike ignited intense backlash. At the time, everything looked like an endless war between the storyteller and the subject being told. But years later, the two sides reconciled, not through loud apologies, but by continuing to sit down, talk, and work together. For Wack, this was proof that he is not trapped in the past, and that in this industry, completely cutting ties can sometimes be more dangerous than swallowing pride. The name Nipsey Hussle represents another chapter more sensitive and more controversial. Wack has spoken about Nipsey's legacy, his standing in the underground, and the respect Nipsey earned from both the streets and the community. After the tragedy of the murder, any words connected to Nipsey became a minefield. Wack knew this. He repeatedly addressed rumors involving Nipsey, Kim Kardashian, and other artists in an environment where social media is always ready to cut and distort statements. What stood out was that Wack consistently emphasized respect, even as outrage and chaos surrounded him. But that very sense of knowing too much kept suspicion about his true motives alive. By 2023, Wack introduced another controversial position related to the concept of snitching. He argued that not every act of exposure equals betrayal. From there, he promoted a new concept. He called exposers, emphasizing revealing truth without necessarily provoking violence or street retaliation. For many, this sounded like a new label for an old behavior. For Wack, it was a moral boundary he drew to justify his role in controversial narratives. In response to accusations that he exploits hip-hop culture for personal gain, Wack pushed back by comparing himself to respected industry executives. He emphasized that he does not only appear when drama erupts, but has made long-term contributions through artist development, crisis management, and keeping business machines running. Yet the question still lingers. When someone stands at the intersection of the streets, money, media, and power is professionalism, enough to erase the sense of danger they leave in the public eye.
All data, analysis, and commentary in this video are presented based on information available at the time of production. The content is subject to change over time and should not be considered a definitive forecast. There is still so much more to explore: stories of resilience, legacy, and truth. Feel free to dive into some of our top recommended videos now appearing on your screen.